Utah is one of the most visited states in America. 5 national parks, red rock canyons, wide open desert that looks like it belongs on another planet. Millions of people come here every year to explore. But scattered across that same desert are at least 17 places where you are explicitly forbidden from setting foot. And some of them, the government would prefer you didn't even know existed. Because Utah is quietly home to a chemical weapons proving ground bigger than Rhode Island, a vault built to survive a nuclear war, and a cave that was permanently sealed shut, with a dead man still trapped inside. These are the places Utah doesn't put on the brochure. Here is how to think about Utah's forbidden places. They fall into distinct categories, and each one reveals something different about why we lock places away. Some are sealed by the military, some by science, some by tragedy, and some by forces nobody can fully explain. Let's start with the ones the military doesn't want you anywhere near. Over 1,250 square miles of restricted desert, ringed by chain link fencing and signs that read, "Deadly Force Authorized." That is Dugway Proving Ground, larger than the entire state of Rhode Island, sitting about 85 miles southwest of Salt Lake City in one of the most desolate stretches of the Great Basin. The military established Dugway in 1942 for a single purpose: testing chemical and biological weapons. During the Cold War, they tested nerve agents, mustard gas, and aerosolized bacteria out here, sometimes on American soldiers who volunteered without fully understanding what they were breathing in. Today, much of what happens inside the proving ground remains classified. The Department of Defense acknowledges ongoing work in chemical defense and weapons testing, but the details lie behind security clearances that most generals never see. You can technically drive a handful of lonely public roads that cross portions of the proving ground's perimeter. But veer off course, even slightly, and you are met with armed response. Locals in the surrounding basin towns call it Area 52, a joke that lands differently when you are standing on an empty highway with no cell signal, watching a distant fence line disappear into heat shimmer, knowing that somewhere behind it, people are doing things the public is not cleared to know about. The landscape does the military's work for it. Miles of cracked alkaline flats stretch in every direction, broken only by sagebrush and the occasional dust devil spinning across the road. At night, there are no lights except your own headlights and whatever the military is running behind the perimeter. There are no witnesses out here because there is no one to witness anything. The emptiness is the first layer of security, and it has been working for over 80 years. If Dugway is where weapons are tested, the next 3 facilities handle what remains when the testing is done, and each one is more unsettling than the last. 2L Army Depot sits in Tooele County, about 35 miles from Salt Lake City. For decades, this was one of the largest chemical weapons stockpiles in the Western Hemisphere. Rows of earth-covered bunkers, called igloos, held artillery shells filled with nerve agent and blister agent. Munitions so dangerous that a single mishandled shell could contaminate groundwater for an entire valley. The depot has spent years destroying that stockpile under international treaty obligations, but the process is painstaking. Only trained disposal personnel are allowed inside the active zones. The fences are not there to protect secrets. They are there to protect everyone outside them from what is stored within. About 40 miles further west, past the Cedar Mountains, sits Clive Disposal Facility. This is where the danger goes from chemical to nuclear. Clive buries low-level radioactive waste shipped in from power plants, hospitals, and federal cleanup sites across the country. No public access. Layers of federal and state regulation govern every truckload that enters. The facility sits in terrain so empty and flat that you could drive past the access road on Interstate 80 and never know what is underneath the soil. The material buried at Clive will remain dangerous for centuries, long after the fences rust, the warning signs fade, and everyone who built the facility is gone. The question is not whether the containment works today. The question is whether it will still work in the year 2500, when nobody alive remembers why this patch of desert was marked off limits. And Clive is not the only restricted zone in that corridor. Hill Air Force Base, north of Salt Lake City, maintains weapons storage areas and testing ranges that are permanently off limits to civilians. Wendover Air Force Base, straddling the Utah-Nevada border, is where the crews of the Enola Gay trained before dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, and portions of that facility remain restricted to this day. Then there is the NSA Utah Data Center in Bluffdale, a massive intelligence facility that processes and stores surveillance data on a scale the government has never fully disclosed. You can see the building from the highway. You will never see what is inside. 7 facilities: chemical weapons, conventional munitions, nuclear waste, classified testing ranges, and intelligence infrastructure, all within a few hours' drive of Salt Lake City. Most Utahns have never heard of half of them. Now, everything I just showed you makes a certain kind of sense. The military locks things down. But the next place on this list is not run by the military. It is not hiding weapons. And what is behind its doors is the last thing you would expect to find inside a mountain. In the 1960s, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints blasted 600 feet into the granite walls of Little Cottonwood Canyon and built a climate-controlled vault spanning over 65,000 square feet across 3 main tunnels and 4 cross tunnels. The doors weigh up to 14 tons each and were designed to survive a direct nuclear strike. The temperature inside never wavers. The humidity is controlled down to fractions of a percent. What is the vault protecting? Birth certificates, marriage licenses, death records, census documents, over 2.4 million rolls of microfilm containing roughly 3.5 billion images of genealogical records, family histories spanning centuries and continents, gathered from archives in dozens of countries. Your great-great-grandmother's name might be in there. The record of a village that no longer exists on any modern map might be in there. Granite Mountain Records Vault is one of the most secure buildings on Earth, and it exists for a single purpose: to make sure that no matter what happens to civilization, the record of who we were survives. No public tours. Biometric access only. The vault is staffed by a small team who work underground in conditions that feel more like a submarine than an office. And here is the kicker that makes the whole thing feel almost absurd. The records stored inside are quietly accessible to anyone with an internet connection. FamilySearch.org hosts digitized copies for free. The vault protects the originals so the copies can belong to everyone. A nuclear blast-proof fortress, built not for warheads but for birth certificates. Not far from Hanksville, in terrain so Mars-like that NASA itself helped validate the resemblance, the Mars Society built a research station that looks like it was dropped from orbit. A 2-story cylindrical habitat, a greenhouse dome, observatories, and rover tracks spread across red desert that could pass for Jezero Crater. Crews live inside in full isolation for weeks at a time, wearing pressurized spacesuits whenever they step outside, running simulations for future missions to the Red Planet. If you drive out on Cow Dung Road, yes, that is the real name, you can see the Mars Desert Research Station from a distance, but you cannot approach it. You cannot interact with the crew. You cannot fly a drone anywhere nearby. The reason is simple, but rigid. Any outside contact breaks the simulation, and these simulations generate real data that feeds real mission planning at NASA and the European Space Agency. It looks like a movie set, but it is doing more serious work than most buildings in the state. Nearby, the ruins of the Topaz War Relocation Center sit in the desert west of Delta. The remains of a Japanese-American internment camp that held over 8,000 people during World War II. The site is accessible in limited ways, but many of the original structures are fenced, fragile, and protected as a National Historic Landmark. It is forbidden not by security clearance, but by the weight of what happened there. Some places are closed because the ground itself is a memorial. So far, every place on this list is forbidden for a reason you can point to on a spreadsheet: national security, preservation, science. But the next few places are different. These are the ones where the reason you cannot go is harder to explain, and in one case, nobody agrees on what the explanation even is. Skinwalker Ranch covers 512 acres near Ballard in the Uinta Basin, bordering Ute tribal lands. For decades, people have reported phenomena here that resist easy categorization. unexplained lights moving in patterns no aircraft could follow, cattle found mutilated with surgical precision, electromagnetic anomalies that scramble equipment, and things that witnesses struggle to put into words at all. The ranch markets itself as the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on the planet. The Pentagon's own Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program reportedly spent millions investigating what was happening on this property. But you will only ever see Skinwalker Ranch through television cameras or from distant public land. The property is strictly off limits, monitored by surveillance cameras and enforced with no trespassing prosecution. The tension is not whether the phenomena are real, it is that the ranch exists in a strange liminal space between science and spectacle, where access is controlled precisely because uncontrolled tourism would destroy whatever experiments are happening inside. Whether the results are groundbreaking or meaningless, nobody outside the fence gets to decide. Visitors can explore the broader landscape. Locals call it UFO Alley, from public campgrounds and ATV trails. But the ranch itself stays behind the wire. Further south, near Moab, abandoned uranium mines dot the canyon country like old wounds. During the Cold War, prospectors tore into the sandstone chasing yellowcake uranium for the nation's nuclear arsenal. When the boom ended, many of those mines were simply walked away from. Shafts left open, tailings piles left exposed, radon gas seeping from tunnels that nobody sealed. Today, these sites are marked with warnings and fenced where possible, but some sit on remote public land where the only barrier between a hiker and a lungful of radioactive dust is a faded sign and common sense. The desert remembers every hole we dug, even when we would rather forget. Nutty Putty Cave sat in Utah County, a clay-lined labyrinth famous among recreational cavers for its tight squeezes. The passages had names that should have been warnings. The Birth Canal, the Helmet Eater. Thousands of people crawled through them over the years, drawn by the thrill of pushing through spaces barely wider than a human ribcage. On November 24, 2009, a 26-year-old medical student named John Edward Jones crawled headfirst into a narrow passage, believing it was a route he had taken before. It was not. He slid forward and the passage tightened. His body wedged at a steep downward angle, head lower than his feet, arms pinned at his sides. He could not move forward. He could not push himself back. He was suspended upside down in the dark, deep inside the earth. Rescuers arrived within hours. They worked for 27 straight hours in passages so tight that only one person could reach Jones at a time, crawling on their stomachs through clay tubes barely wider than their shoulders to reach a man they could hear but could not free. At one point, a pulley system managed to shift his body a few inches, just enough to give everyone hope. Rescuers shouted encouragement. Jones was conscious, talking, asking about his wife and their unborn child. Then a bolt failed. The system collapsed. Jones slid back into the crevice, deeper than before. His heart gave out shortly after, his body overwhelmed by the pressure of hanging inverted for more than a day. He was 26 years old. And then came the decision that still haunts the people who made it. Recovering the body would have required widening the passage with explosives, risking further collapse, risking more deaths in a space that had already proven it could kill. The landowner and John's family chose to seal the cave permanently. Workers poured concrete over the entrance. Nutty Putty Cave is not just closed, it is a tomb. The concrete plug is his headstone. The word forbidden means something different here than it does at a military base. There is no classified program behind that seal, just a man who never came home, and the people who had to decide that bringing him back was not worth losing someone else. In 1933, a woman named Marie Ogden claimed that God spoke to her through her typewriter and instructed her to build a refuge at the center of the universe, a patch of desert near Church Rock in San Juan County. She called it the home of truth. Followers came, built structures, and lived communally in preparation for what Ogden said was the coming apocalypse. When a follower named Edith Peshak died, Ogden refused to bury her. She believed she could resurrect the woman, and she kept the body for years, slowly mummifying in the desert heat while the colony unraveled around her. Followers drifted away, supplies ran thin, the resurrection never came. Eventually, authorities intervened and the body was buried, but Ogden never admitted she had been wrong. The 1930s buildings still stand behind fences on private land along Utah State Route 211. You can glimpse the structures from the highway, sun-bleached and leaning, but the property remains closed. The owner has discussed limited tours after restoration, but for now, the Home of Truth sits exactly as time left it. A monument to belief pushed past the point where anyone else could follow. Then there is the Old Mill in Cottonwood Heights, an 1880s paper mill gutted by fire in 1893, later reborn as a dance hall and even a disco before being condemned in 2005. It is now considered one of Utah's most haunted structures, a reputation that draws trespassers regularly enough that police actively patrol and cite anyone who slips inside. The building is closed for structural safety, not supernatural reasons, but the stories persist, and so does the urge to get in. And scattered across Utah's remote basin and range country, dozens of abandoned mining towns sit behind fences or posted warnings, structures too unstable to enter, mine shafts too deep to approach safely, ghost towns where the only residents are the stories people tell about them. Each one is a small monument to the same impulse. Someone came, extracted what they could, and left the land to remember what happened. Pull back far enough and a pattern emerges. Utah is a state that invites millions of people to explore its landscape every year. 5 national parks, endless trails, canyons that make you feel like the first person to ever stand there. But embedded in that same landscape are places that say stop here, go no further. Some protect the living from danger. Some protect the dead from disturbance. Some protect data from contamination. And some protect secrets that may never be fully understood. 17 places, 17 fences, 17 reasons, ranging from national security to human grief to questions that have no answers yet. The fences are always there for a reason. The urge to cross them is what makes us human. Utah sells itself as wide open, and it is. But the next time you look at that postcard desert, the red rock glowing under a setting sun, remember what is buried beneath the sand, locked inside the mountains, and sealed behind the concrete. The desert keeps its secrets better than anywhere else in America, and some of those secrets are never meant to be found.